Okay, hey guys. So this week we are learning about the Roman Republic. So if you think back to last week, we learned about the social structure of Rome. We learned about the patricians, who were the wealthy upper class, the plebeians, who were the lower class, and the slaves and how slave life was. This week we're focusing on the government of Rome and how these people actually got to participate in the government. So, to start, in the beginning, Rome was a monarchy. So if you think back to Greece, or if you think back to civics, if you took civics last year, a monarchy is when one person rules. And so in the beginning, Rome was a monarchy, and the patricians decided, we don't really want to follow the king anymore. So they overthrew the king to try to get more power. And that was in 509 BCE. So when the patricians did overthrow them, they created something called a republic. So a republic is a government where the power is held by the people and their elected officials. So very similar to democracy. So you'll hear the Roman Republic a lot. It was the early part of ancient Rome, and eventually it will stop being a republic. But we're going to look at now the jobs associated with people in the Roman Republic. So looking at this chart, you can see that there are three boxes. So it's titled the Roman Republic. It's kind of broken into three branches of government. And so this one is going to be your consuls. And we're going to get into what those mean in a second. This one's going to be our praetors. And then this one's going to be our senate. So you can see there are three very even divisions of the government in ancient Rome. Very similar to how the United States is with our three branches of government. So looking in more detail at this, we're going to start with the consuls. So the consuls, they were like the executive branch. So it was two men, and they were elected by the people. They only served 1 year in Rome, and they were in control of the army, and they acted as the chief leaders of Rome. So you can kind of compare the consul to the president, except there's two of them, and they only serve for 1 year. The next part of the Roman government was the Senate. So there were 300 men that served in the Senate of Rome. Their main job was to create laws and advise the consuls. Very similar to America's government, we have the legislative branch, and part of the legislative branch is the Senate. They create laws, and they help the president. The last government branch in the Roman government was the praetors, and so this is more like the judicial branch. They had 8 men that served as the judges of Rome, and they served for life, very similar to how America is with the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. So there were some problems with the government. So the first problem was only patricians could participate in government. So only that 5% wealthy class could participate in the government. The second was the plebeians had no say in laws. So they literally had no say in laws. Very similar to Greece, how slaves and women couldn't vote. They just kind of weren't asked about anything. The third one was the laws only benefited the rich. And then the last one was the laws were frequently changed as punishment for the poor. So if the patricians wanted to, get back at the plebeians or kind of sway the laws in their favor, they could change the laws in like a day and not alert any of the plebeians of the changing of the laws because they had no say in government. So what happened was something called the conflict of orders. So in 494 BCE, the plebeians demanded more rights. So they revolted, they refused to work, they pretty much protested until the patricians agreed. And so they came up with 3 terms. The first one, the plebeians wanted a law-making body to represent them. So they basically wanted a part in the government where they can make laws for their people. And so they also had the right to veto laws by the Senate. And so if you think back to civics, or if you are in 7th grade and haven't taken civics, veto means to reject a law. So if the Senate made a law, they wanted the right to reject it if they didn't like it. The second thing was that laws had to be written down for everyone to know and for all to understand. That way they couldn't just change them in a day and kind of surprise the plebeians. The last one is one of the two consuls had to be a plebeian, and the plebeians could serve on the Senate. So they got a ton of rights by protesting, and it kind of evened out the government of Rome, and more people could participate. One of the branches that was created after this was something called the tribunes. And so the tribunes was the lawmaking body that the plebs got. There were 10 plebs that served on this council, and they made laws just for the plebeian people. So they didn't make laws for the Senate, but they made laws for their people. So if we're looking at this chart, you can see the purple are patricians and the pink are plebeians. And so after all this happened, you can see that there is a patrician consul and a plebeian consul. This is our executive branch. There are patrician senators, plebeian senators. Over here we have our tribunes, which are plebeians that just made laws for their people. Eventually the citizens got the right to participate and vote in the laws. So Rome was a lot more inclusive than Greece. They allowed way more people to participate in the government. So some important ideas that started in the Roman Republic is the idea of checks and balances. So checks and balances is where the other branches have to ask permission to do certain things. It limits other branches' power. And so this really put a hold on the power of the three branches of government. And we use checks and balances today in our government because not one branch has all the power. The second thing that came up is separation of powers. Each part of the government had their own specific jobs. And so the Senate made laws, the executive branch, the consuls, they had the army. So it really kind of separated out what each part of the Roman government was responsible for. And these two ideas are also super important because America uses them in their government today. We literally took this idea and stole it from Rome. So the last little thing I want to go over is comparing the United States to Rome. I said it a bunch of times in this presentation. We stole a lot of ideas from the Roman government. So both Rome and the US have an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch. So if you look here at executive, they had 2 consuls. They were elected for the people. They served for 1 year. In comparison, we have a president elected by the people every 4 years. They had a legislative branch. They had a Senate of 300 people. They also had the tribunes who made laws for the plebeians. We have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives that make laws for us. They had a judicial branch. There were 8 praetors. And then we have the Supreme Court. We have 9 Supreme Court justices, and it's the highest court in America. They had a legal code, which is basically just a constitution. Their constitution was called the 12 Tables. Ours is called the Constitution. And as far as citizenship goes, all adult male landowners could participate in government. That obviously changed when the plebeians got more power. And for us, all citizens can participate in the government. So a lot of similarities there.